Every gardener knows the moment. You step into the garden on a warm morning in early summer and something feels wrong before you even see it. The tomato plant you checked yesterday looked perfect. Today, 3 leaves are stripped to the veins. There are small green caterpillars moving along the stems, and you realize they have been working through the night while you slept. So you do what most of us do. You go to the shed, find a bottle of something that promises to kill insects on contact, and you spray everything down. The next morning, the caterpillars are gone. The problem seems solved. 2 weeks later, the aphids arrive. Then the beetles. Then something else you cannot identify, but that clearly does not belong. By midsummer, you are spraying every week, sometimes twice a week, and the pests keep returning as if nothing happened. The garden becomes a place you defend rather than a place you enjoy. And every season the cycle repeats. But there is another way to think about pests. One that does not begin with a spray bottle or a product. One that begins much earlier, long before the first insect ever reaches your plants. In parts of Pennsylvania, Ohio, and Indiana, farming communities have been growing food for more than 3 centuries without using a single synthetic pesticide. Their gardens are not pest-free. No garden ever is. But the damage remains manageable, and the plants stay healthy season after season without constant intervention. What they understand is something most modern gardeners were never taught. Pest control does not happen on the leaves. It happens in the soil, in the spacing between plants, in the insects you invite into the garden on purpose, and in the 15 minutes you spend walking through your rows each morning before the day begins. The difference is not better products, it is better design. When you build a garden that works with the biological systems already present in nature, those systems handle most of the pest pressure for you. You do not eliminate insects, you create an environment where the insects that eat your plants are kept in check by the insects that eat them. It is not a battle. It is a balance. And once that balance is in place, the exhausting cycle of spray and return finally stops. The communities that developed this approach are often called Old Order Amish, and they live primarily in rural settlements across Pennsylvania, Ohio, and Indiana. Their agricultural practices were shaped during the 18th and 19th centuries, when European farming traditions met the realities of American soil and climate. For Amish farmers, sustainability was never an abstract concept. It was a practical necessity. If a method required purchasing new products every season, it created dependency on suppliers and cash income that might not always be available. If a method damaged the soil or required increasingly aggressive interventions over time, it threatened the land that future generations would inherit. So the practices that survived across centuries were the ones that worked within natural cycles rather than against them. In conventional agriculture, pests are treated as invaders that must be eliminated. The Amish approach is different. They recognize that insects are part of the ecosystem, and trying to remove them entirely disrupts the balance that keeps any single species from becoming overwhelming. Instead of asking how to kill pests, they ask a different question. How do we design a garden where pest populations remain small enough that the plants can tolerate them? The answer involves several layers of strategy, and each layer reinforces the others. Soil health determines how strong the plants will be when pests arrive. Plant diversity makes it harder for pests to locate their target crops. Habitat for beneficial insects creates a population of predators that hunt pests continuously. Observation catches problems while they are still small, and intervention happens only when necessary, in ways that do not destroy the beneficial populations already working in the garden. These are not separate techniques. They are parts of a single system, and the system only works when all the parts are present. This is why spraying a pesticide, even an organic one, often fails to solve the problem long term. It removes the pests, but it also removes the predators. And without predators, the pests return as soon as the spray wears off, often in greater numbers than before, because nothing is left to control them. The first place most gardeners look when they see pest damage is the leaves. The Amish look at the soil. Plants grown in biologically active soil rich in organic matter and populated by diverse microbial communities, produce stronger cell walls and higher concentrations of defensive compounds than plants grown in depleted soil. These defensive compounds are naturally occurring chemicals that make the plant less palatable or less digestible to insects. The plant produces them continuously as part of normal growth, but only when the soil provides the raw materials and biological support necessary for that production. When soil is treated primarily as a delivery system for synthetic fertilizers, the microbial populations that support these processes decline. The plant may grow quickly, but the internal chemistry that makes it resilient to pest pressure often remains underdeveloped. This is why two tomato plants of the same variety, planted side by side, can respond very differently to the same pest. The difference is metabolic, and metabolism is shaped by what the roots encounter in the soil. Amish gardeners build their soil the same way every year. In early spring, before planting begins, they spread a layer of well-aged compost across the entire garden, typically 2 to 3 inches deep, and work it into the top 4 to 6 inches of soil. The compost is not fresh. It has been aged for at least 6 months, allowing microbial decomposition to stabilize the nutrients and eliminate pathogens. Many Amish families use compost that includes aged horse or cow manure mixed with bedding straw and garden waste. This combination provides both the carbon-rich material that feeds soil fungi and the nitrogen-rich material that supports bacterial populations. When this compost is incorporated into the soil and watered, the microbial populations begin interacting with plant roots almost immediately. Fungi extend thread-like filaments through the soil, connecting to root surfaces and trading nutrients for sugars the plant produces through photosynthesis. Bacteria colonize the rhizosphere, the narrow zone of soil directly surrounding the roots, where they help dissolve minerals and produce enzymes that plants cannot make on their own. The practical effect becomes visible within a few weeks of planting. Seedlings grown in compost-amended soil develop thicker stems and darker green leaves. Their root systems expand more quickly, allowing them to access water and nutrients from a larger volume of soil. And when pests arrive, these plants recover from minor damage much faster. Healthy soil does not eliminate all pest problems. It raises the threshold at which pest damage becomes serious. The plant can tolerate more pressure before it begins to fail, and that tolerance creates time for other parts of the system to respond. The second layer of the system involves how plants are arranged in space. Most home gardens are planted in rows, organized by crop type. All the tomatoes together, all the cabbage in another row, all the squash at the far end. This makes harvesting easier, but to an insect searching for food, a long row of identical plants is an unmistakable signal. Many garden pests locate their host plants by following chemical compounds released into the air. Tomato hornworms are attracted to volatile compounds produced by tomato leaves. Cabbage moths follow the scent signature of brassicas. Squash bugs navigate toward cucurbits using airborne cues that travel dozens of meters downwind. When you plant 20 tomato plants in a single row, you create a concentrated plume of scent that insects can detect from a considerable distance. Amish gardeners disrupt this process by planting aromatic herbs and flowers directly among their vegetables. The strong scents released by these companion plants interfere with the chemical signals that pests use for navigation. Entomologists call this olfactory confusion. The pest can still smell its host plant, but the signal is buried within a mixture of other scents that make it difficult to pinpoint the exact location. The most widely used companion in Amish gardens is basil planted near tomatoes. For every 3 to 4 tomato plants, one basil plant is placed roughly 8 to 10 inches from the base of the tomato. Basil releases volatile oils that repel aphids, whiteflies, and tomato hornworms. Between rows of cabbage, broccoli, and kale, Amish gardeners plant dill or cilantro every 12 to 14 inches. These herbs repel cabbage moths, the white butterflies that lay eggs on brassica leaves. But dill and cilantro provide a second benefit. When these herbs flower, they produce small umbrella-shaped clusters of tiny blossoms that attract parasitic wasps and hoverflies. Parasitic wasps are tiny, often smaller than a grain of rice, and they do not sting humans. Instead, they lay their eggs inside the bodies of caterpillars and aphids. When the wasp larvae hatch, they consume the pest from the inside, killing it before it can cause further damage. Hoverfly larvae are voracious predators that can consume hundreds of aphids during their development. By planting dill and cilantro among brassicas, you are not only repelling one pest, but also recruiting the natural enemies of several others. Around the outer edges of the garden, Amish families plant French marigolds, spaced about 10 to 12 inches apart. Their roots release a compound called alpha-terphenol into the soil, which suppresses root knot nematodes. Above ground, the strong scent of marigold foliage deters whiteflies and squash bugs. The principle remains the same regardless of the specific plants chosen. Never plant a single crop in isolation. Always surround it with companions that confuse the pests searching for it and attract the predators that will control any pests that do manage to find it. The third layer addresses something most gardeners overlook entirely. If you remove every pest the moment it appears, what will the predators eat? A garden with no pests cannot support a population of beneficial insects, and without beneficial insects, the garden becomes completely dependent on human intervention. The goal is not to eliminate pests. The goal is to maintain a small pest population that feeds a much larger population of predators. A single ladybug can consume up to 50 aphids in one day. Lacewing larvae can consume more than 200 aphids before they pupate. Parasitic wasps lay their eggs inside hornworms, cabbage worms, and aphids, killing them before they can reproduce. Ground beetles patrol the soil surface at night, feeding on slugs, cutworms, and root-feeding grubs. These predators do not need to be purchased or introduced. They already exist in the environment, and they will colonize your garden naturally if you provide what they need. What they need is food, and food means nectar and pollen. Most beneficial insects are predators only during their larval stage. As adults, they feed primarily on nectar and pollen from flowers. Without a continuous supply of flowering plants, adult beneficials leave the garden to search for food elsewhere, and the predator population collapses. This is why Amish gardens always include what is now called an insectary strip, a dedicated section of the garden planted with flowers and herbs that bloom continuously from spring through fall. The strip does not need to be large. Even a border 2 feet wide along one edge of the garden provides enough habitat to support a significant predator population. The most effective plants for this purpose are sweet alyssum, yarrow, fennel, dill, and Queen Anne's lace. Sweet alyssum is planted at the front because it stays low and blooms continuously throughout the season. Behind it, yarrow and dill are planted in alternating clusters, spaced about 10 to 12 inches apart. At the back of the strip, fennel can be planted if space allows. The key to making this system work is ensuring that something is always in bloom. If the flowers fade in midsummer and no new blooms appear, the beneficial insects disperse to find food elsewhere. In addition to the insectary strip, Amish gardeners leave small areas of their property intentionally wild. A patch of clover near the garden provides ground cover where ground beetles can shelter during the day. An unmowed strip along the fence allows native wildflowers to establish. A pile of stones or a stack of old logs offers hiding places for beetles, spiders, and other beneficial arthropods. These are not signs of neglect. They are deliberate design choices that recognize a simple truth. Beneficial insects need somewhere to live, breed, and overwinter. Once the insectary strip is established and blooming, beneficial insects arrive on their own, and their populations grow naturally as the season progresses. By midsummer, a well-designed garden hums with activity. Hoverflies patrol the leaves. Ladybugs cluster near aphid colonies. Parasitic wasps move methodically through the foliage. Ground beetles emerge at dusk to hunt slugs and cutworms. The gardener does not need to manage this activity. The system manages itself, and pest populations remain low because predators are always present, always hunting, and always reproducing. This is the difference between a garden that requires constant intervention and a garden that functions as an ecosystem. The fourth layer is the one that requires the most consistency, and it is also the one that makes the biggest difference. Every morning, before the day's work begins, Amish gardeners walk through their gardens with attention. They turn over leaves, check the undersides of foliage, run their eyes along stems, and look for anything that does not belong. When they find a pest, they remove it by hand and drop it into a bucket of soapy water. This practice is so simple that many gardeners dismiss it as impractical. It seems easier to wait until damage becomes visible and then spray the entire garden. But that approach misunderstands how pest populations grow. Most serious pest damage does not come from a few insects. It comes from exponential reproduction that happens when a small population is allowed to grow unchecked. A single female aphid can produce dozens of offspring in a week, and those offspring can reproduce within days of being born. 2 aphids on Monday can become 200 by the following Monday if nothing intervenes. One tomato hornworm can strip an entire branch of foliage in 48 hours. The morning walk catches these problems when they are still small. 2 hornworms removed on Monday means 0 hornworms on Monday, not 20 hornworms by Friday. The practice requires 15 to 20 minutes each morning, and it becomes faster with experience. The method is straightforward. Bring a small bucket filled halfway with water and a squirt of dish soap. Start at one end of the garden and work through each row systematically. For tomatoes, look along the top leaves and the main stems. Hornworms camouflage well, but their droppings, dark green or black, roughly the size of a peppercorn, accumulate quickly beneath an active feeding site. Once you spot the droppings, look directly above them and you will usually find the hornworm within a few inches. For squash and cucumber plants, flip the leaves and examine the undersides. Squash bugs lay clusters of small bronze-colored eggs on the undersides of leaves, usually near the base of the plant. Scraping them off with your thumbnail before they hatch prevents the problem entirely. For brassicas like cabbage, broccoli, and kale, look for small green caterpillars that blend into the leaf color. If you see white butterflies hovering around your brassicas, check the plants the following morning. The butterflies are laying eggs, and those eggs will hatch within a few days. This daily practice does more than remove pests. It teaches you to read the garden. You begin noticing patterns, and deviations from normal become immediately obvious. After a season or two, the practice stops feeling like work. It becomes a quiet part of the morning routine, a few minutes of observation before the rest of the day begins. The 5th layer involves a strategy that seems counterintuitive at first. Instead of trying to keep every pest out of the garden, you invite them in deliberately, but you send them to the wrong place. This is called trap cropping, and it works because most pests have strong preferences for certain plants. If you give them access to something they prefer even more than your main crop, they will choose it consistently. The most widely used trap crop in Amish gardens is nasturtium. Aphids are wildly attracted to nasturtiums, far more than they are to beans, peppers, or most other vegetables. Nasturtiums are planted in a ring around the outer edge of the garden or at the ends of rows, spaced about 6 to 8 inches apart. Within days of the first leaves opening, aphids begin colonizing the nasturtiums, and they stay there. Once the nasturtiums are loaded with aphids, you have 2 options. You can pull the plants and dispose of them, or you can leave them in place and allow the ladybugs, lacewings, and parasitic wasps from your insectary strip to come and feed. The second option is often more effective because it provides a concentrated food source that keeps beneficial insect populations high throughout the season. For flea beetles, which are a persistent problem on eggplant and young brassicas, radishes work as an effective trap crop. They prefer radish leaves to almost any other plant. So planting a row of radishes about 2 feet in front of your main planting draws the beetles away. Blue Hubbard squash is another traditional trap crop. If you grow any kind of squash, zucchini, or pumpkin, planting 2 or 3 Blue Hubbard squash plants at the far corners of your garden will draw squash vine borers and cucumber beetles away from your main planting. You are not trying to save the Blue Hubbard. You are using it as a decoy. The beauty of trap cropping is that it requires no ongoing labor once the plants are established. You plant it once at the beginning of the season, and it works continuously until frost. The pests do exactly what they are biologically programmed to do. They simply do it in a location where you do not mind. The 6th layer is the only one that involves making something, and it takes about 10 minutes. For most of the season, if the previous layers are in place, pest pressure remains manageable without any direct intervention. But there are times when a specific problem develops faster than the system can respond. In those situations, Amish gardeners use a simple homemade spray made from ingredients already available in the kitchen. Take 4 to 5 cloves of garlic and 2 hot peppers, chop them roughly, and add them to 1 quart of warm water. Let the mixture steep overnight, at least 12 hours. The next morning, strain the liquid through cheesecloth into a spray bottle and add 1 teaspoon of liquid dish soap. Spray the mixture directly onto affected plants, focusing on the undersides of leaves where most pests hide during the day. Apply it in early morning or late evening, never in direct midday sun, because the soap can cause minor leaf burn when combined with intense heat. 1 application usually keeps pests away for 5 to 7 days. This spray does not kill insects on contact the way synthetic pesticides do. It works by making the plant smell and taste unpleasant to the insects, so they move elsewhere to feed. This spray works best when combined with everything else: healthy soil, companion planting, beneficial insects, and daily observation. It is part of a system, not a replacement for the system. When used correctly, it provides temporary relief while the rest of the garden's defenses catch up. One advantage of this homemade spray over commercial products is that it does not persist in the environment. The compounds break down within days, leaving no residue on the plants or in the soil. And because it is made from food-safe ingredients, there is no waiting period before harvesting. After spending time observing how these methods work together, certain patterns become clear. Most of us were taught to think about pest control in a very specific way, and that way of thinking shapes every decision we make in the garden. We see a problem, and we look for a product to fix it. We see insects, and we interpret their presence as failure. The Amish approach operates from a completely different set of assumptions. They see a few aphids and do not panic because they know the ladybugs are coming. They see a small pest population and recognize it as food for the predators they have invited into the garden. This difference in perspective changes everything. One of the most common patterns in conventional gardening is reaching for a spray at the first sign of any insect. But in a garden designed to support beneficial insects, a small pest population is not a problem. It is part of the system. If you spray every aphid the moment you see one, you remove the food source that keeps ladybugs, lacewings, and parasitic wasps in your garden. When the next wave of aphids arrives, there are no predators left to control them. The Amish let the system respond before they intervene. Another common pattern is planting in monoculture rows. All the tomatoes together, all the beans together, all the squash together. It looks organized and it makes harvesting straightforward, but it also makes your garden far more vulnerable to pest outbreaks. Interplanting breaks up that signal. When tomatoes are surrounded by basil, marigolds, and dill, the scent signature becomes fragmented, and pests have a much harder time locating their target. A third pattern is keeping the garden too clean. Many gardeners believe that bare soil between rows and perfectly mulched beds are signs of good management. But a garden with no wild edges, no unmowed strips, and no ground cover between rows eliminates habitat for the beneficial insects that patrol the soil surface. Ground beetles need cool, moist hiding places during the day. Spiders need plant stems and leaf litter to anchor their webs. Many parasitic wasps overwinter in plant debris or hollow stems left standing through the winter. A thin layer of straw mulch between rows, a patch of clover at the garden's edge, or a small pile of stones near the compost bin provides the habitat these predators need without creating chaos or disorder. The fourth pattern, and perhaps the most important, is treating soil health and pest control as separate topics. The Amish never made that separation. They understood, through generations of observation, that weak soil grows weak plants, and weak plants attract pests. Strong soil grows strong plants, and strong plants can tolerate pest pressure without collapsing. Pest control begins in the soil, not on the leaves. Plants grown in biologically active, organic, matter-rich soil produce higher concentrations of defensive compounds, develop stronger cell walls, and recover from damage more quickly than plants grown in depleted soil. When you build your soil every year with compost, you are not just feeding the plants. You are building their immune system. There is one more technique worth mentioning, and it is the kind of detail that rarely appears in gardening books, but makes a significant difference for anyone who transplants seedlings into the garden. Cutworms are one of the most frustrating pests a gardener can encounter, not because they are difficult to control, but because the damage they cause is so sudden and complete. Cutworms are the larvae of several species of night-flying moths, and they live in the soil during the day, emerging after dark to feed. They chew through the stem of a young plant right at soil level, severing it completely. By morning, the plant is lying on its side, wilted, and dying. Once a cutworm cuts through the stem, the plant cannot be saved. The Amish solution is far simpler than applying insecticide. When transplanting a seedling into the garden, they place a collar made from a cardboard tube around the base of the plant. The collar is pushed about 1 inch into the soil and rises about 2 inches above the surface. The cardboard can come from toilet paper rolls or paper towel rolls cut into sections. Cutworms crawl along the soil surface at night, and when they encounter the cardboard collar, they cannot reach the stem to chew through it. The plant remains protected during the most vulnerable period, which is the first 4 to 6 weeks after transplanting. By that time, the stem has hardened enough that cutworms can no longer bite through it, and the cardboard has begun breaking down naturally from exposure to water and soil microbes. Within 2 months, the cardboard is gone entirely, decomposed into the soil without leaving any residue or waste. No plastic, no chemicals, no ongoing maintenance. Just a piece of cardboard and the understanding that a young plant needs protection only during the narrow window when its stem is still soft and vulnerable. What all of these methods share is a single underlying principle. They do not try to eliminate pests from the garden. They create conditions where pest populations remain small enough that the plants can tolerate them, and where natural predators keep those populations from growing out of control. This is a fundamentally different goal than the one most gardeners are taught to pursue. We are told that a successful garden is one with no visible insects, no damage, and no problems. But that vision of success is both unrealistic and unsustainable. Insects are part of every outdoor environment, and trying to remove them entirely requires constant effort, constant expense, and constant disruption of the biological systems that would otherwise regulate pest populations naturally. The Amish approach accepts that insects will always be present, and it works with that reality instead of fighting against it. Soil is built every year so that plants grow strong enough to withstand minor damage. Companions are planted so that pests struggle to locate their target crops. Habitat is created so that predators arrive naturally and stay throughout the season. Observation happens daily so that problems are caught while they are still small. Trap crops redirect pests to locations where they cause no harm. And when direct intervention is necessary, it is done gently, temporarily, and in ways that do not destroy the beneficial populations already working in the garden. None of these methods is complicated. None of them requires expensive products or specialized equipment. What they require is a willingness to think about the garden differently. Not as a battlefield where you must defeat an enemy, but as an ecosystem where your role is to create balance rather than enforce control. This shift in thinking is not easy for everyone. We have been conditioned to believe that problems require products, that pests require poisons, and that a garden left to its own devices will collapse into chaos. But the evidence suggests otherwise. Gardens managed according to these principles often become more productive over time, not less. Soil improves year after year as organic matter accumulates and microbial populations diversify. Beneficial insect populations stabilize and return each season without needing to be reintroduced. Plants grow more vigorously, recover from stress more quickly, and produce harvests that rival or exceed those from gardens managed with synthetic inputs. And the gardener spends less time reacting to crises and more time observing, learning, and enjoying the space they have created. The morning walk stops feeling like a chore and becomes a quiet ritual, a few minutes of attention before the rest of the day begins. The garden stops feeling like something that needs constant correction and starts feeling like something that knows how to take care of itself, as long as you provide the conditions it needs. This is what traditional farming communities understood long before modern agriculture developed the tools to override natural systems. They understood that nature already has mechanisms for regulating pest populations, and that those mechanisms work remarkably well when given the opportunity. The role of the gardener is not to control every variable. It is to design the garden in a way that allows those mechanisms to function. When you do that, the exhausting cycle of spray and return finally stops. Not because you found a better product, but because you stopped needing one. The pests are still there, but they are no longer a problem. The predators are there too, and they are doing the work you used to do with the spray bottle. The soil is alive, the plants are strong, and the garden has become what it was always capable of being. not a place you defend, a place that defends itself.